Reiki blessings, everyone. This is Sherry. Welcome back to the Running on Reiki Light podcast. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about the power of poetry and how poetry in itself, whether you're writing it, reading it, listening to it, is a meditative spiritual practice. I think that poetry is a lost art form, unfortunately. A lot of times, I think because we're all in such a rushed go, go, go world, we don't want to take the time for the esotericness, is that a word, of poetry, meaning that it's very mysterious. And sometimes you're reading it and it has a beautiful lyricism to it and a flow and a burst of expression of emotions, of course. But can be this tendency to feel like it's overwhelming. You're trying to figure out what the person is trying to say, that what they're trying to say is hidden within the poem instead of just forthright. And I think in this busy, busy world, most people, when they're looking for something to fill them up, they want something that is clear and that goes directly to the task of doing that. What I would suggest is that you allow poetry when you are writing it or reading it or listening to it to unfold and to put aside trying to figure out what the poet was trying to say and bring to the forefront what is arising within your body, within your mind, thoughts, emotions, psyche, spiritual or auric field, ego, higher self, because that's what we're ultimately trying to get to, is this connection, this communication, this understanding of who we truly are and why we're here, why we've experienced what we have, why we've called it in, because we have called it in on some level, and how it's evolving us as a soul as we go through the human journey. I would offer to you that poetry is very much a parallel modality to counseling. When you go for counseling, which is beneficial on so many levels, especially just having an unbiased person listening to your story and being able to mirror it back to you in a way that has no judgment. Poetry can be the same thing. Counseling is not something that is done in one session and over. It's usually something that takes time and energy, and there's much contemplation and deep self-reflection that comes along with it. And a poem can be very similar. So when you're reading a poem, allow the healing that's within the poem and the poet as a vessel, just like your counselor is a vessel for you to express your inner world. Allow that to happen with the poem as well, where you're listening to, reading what the poet is saying, but alongside it is running this idea of what is within this poem for me. Where is my insight here, my personal wisdom, my personal evolution? It's really like having a conversation with the poet, but you're on the listening side of it. You're just sitting there. It's as if you're sitting with a friend and they're telling you a story, an experience of their life, and you're in a state of sacred space. You're holding sacred space. You're doing deep listening. But at the same time, you're knowing that because we are all connected and we're all one in essence, and we come from the same creator, that there's something in this conversation, this story, this experience that came up with you with this person for you. It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. It means that you will find the parallel story within their story. You will have that aha moment in that conversation or the reading and listening of that poem, which is, oh, this is what I was brought to this experience, this story, this poem for. Reading poetry to a person who is very practical minded in personality can be very confusing, can feel useless. I remember when I used to go to the women's shelter weekly, and I started out by taking poetry in, and we would read it and then discuss the poems, and that would just, send us into a whole spiral of conversation about. And it was interesting in that setting to watch how every single woman picked at a different part of the poem that really resonated for her. But yet, when we had a conversation out loud, we were able to see how we could connect all of the points that we each individually picked out. But I remember there was this one woman, and when I put the poem on the paper in front of her, she put her hand on it and pushed it back at me, and she said, "I don't like poetry." And instead of being offended, I just took a breath and I said, "Okay, well, let's, you can participate as much as you would like to participate." And what was interesting to see, because I just gave her that allowance, which of course I should have, it is her free will, to just sit there and absorb what she wanted to absorb. She did stay. And by the end of the poetry class or circle, she was contributing, she was talking, she was engaging. So she may have walked out of there and started to look at poetry in a whole new way. For all I know, she may have started to write poetry. It could have been something that was absolutely life-changing for her. So sometimes the things that we say, never, 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 this is not for me, I've found as I've gotten to the ripe age of 56, that list is getting longer and longer as I start to realize, oh, I need to just give this a chance from a different perspective, from a different direction. I also think that poetry, like counseling, is very intense. It has an intensity to it, regardless of what the emotion the poet is describing. It's very deep, it's very intense, and that can be a scary prospect for people, which I think is why a lot of people say, no, I'm not interested in poetry. If I'm looking to learn about the beauty of nature, I'd rather just go out and walk in nature, or I'd rather read a book about the benefits of engaging in nature, something that is a direct experience versus a lot of, again, lyricism and metaphor and that type of thing, which you do see in poems, where you're almost wondering, well, what exactly is the writer trying to say here? But I do think that in fact is the beauty of poetry, whether you're reading it or writing it, is that it challenges you on a new level. It challenges your brain on a new level. It challenges your heart on a new level. It challenges your soul on a new level, to look at the world in a different way. And especially to allow the mystery of life, of our existence here on planet Earth, to be that, a mystery, and to not always feel like things have to be analyzed or black and white. Just allow the flow of the words to fill you in whatever way they do fill you, to shape you in whatever way they do shape you. So again, when you are reading a poem, it's not so much about what the author or poet is saying as it is about what you're feeling. And take notice of that, be aware of that, because awareness within any spiritual practice is this idea of allowing, is paying attention to what is present and what is showing up for you. And even in not understanding a poem, there is a gift in that concept of applying the energy of awareness. For instance, what is the poem triggering? It could be triggering something that has nothing to even do with the poem. So now you have this concept of journaling, and to get to understanding why. Why did it trigger a particular memory for you? Why did it trigger an issue around relationships in your life, etc.? Reading a poem can trigger emotions that you have been suppressing and really repressing and pushing down. And so being aware what emotions are coming up. And it may be sadness when the poem is about beauty. And it may be anger when the poem is about beauty. It's like, you may have a contradictory emotion coming up. And so that's really curious, isn't it? Be curious about that. Be curious about the awareness of every sensation that's happening in your body. Do you feel a tug in your heart? Do you feel a churning in your stomach? Do you feel a small headache coming on? Things like that. So now you go deeper with that in a meditative practice. Why did the poem arise these things within you? Poetry is a creative process. It is God, goddess, spirit, the universe, however you say what is your creator, speaking through you as the writer, speaking through you as the reader. It's on both ends of that, the expressing and also the listening. So it's a deep meditative practice in both listening and also speaking. And I think what happens a lot of times is that it's natural that when you take to poetry and you start to read it, that you then have an inclination to write poetry yourself. And that starts another ball of wax, which is the judging of your writing. And there's deep healing in that and deep evolution, because we all must find our voice, and we all must trust our voice, and we all must allow our voice and not feel that the grammar is wrong, or the timing is wrong, or the rhythm of the poem is wrong, or there's not enough rhyme, or the flow, whatever it is, the wording. It's a process to hone that poem and get it to where it is an exact representation of what it is that you are inside, what you are feeling, what you need to say. I actually had a good friend reach out the other day, and I think she did because she knew that I've written 2 books of poetry, and she said, I don't know what's happening to me, but I think I wrote something, and I don't know what it is. I think it's a poem. Is it a poem? Can I send it to you? Would you look it over? Would you tell me where it needs to be changed and flow needs to go better, or there might be a better word here or there, that type thing? And I said, oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, I was just so honored that she would do that she would think of me for that. And when I read it, it was so beautiful. And it was about a very, I won't get into the topic matter, but it was about a very important moment in her life and how it changed her entire life and changed her entire family, her extended family, and how they looked at life and how they came together around this moment to be there for each other, and how that moment has changed them all and how they've grown together as a family over the years. And the first thing that struck me was the level of emotion. I could feel it in every word, every turn of phrase, the way she put the words together, the spaces between the words. And never in a million years would I ever say to her, oh, you should add a word here or take a word out there or change this word, because that would be taking away her personal expression and the way I might have written that poem about that particular life experience, because actually I've had a similar life experience, would probably have come out completely different than how she did it. But that's the beauty of it. There's no right or wrong in poetry. It's a place of freedom from that concept of right and wrong. And that's what I tried to express to her as we were talking back and forth. Like, she said, I've never written anything before. Like, this is so new for me, but I couldn't stop this from coming out. And that is amazing. That's your creator expressing through you. And you are a vessel for that. Your experiences are a vessel for that. And all of our experiences are a vessel for God living and becoming through us. And poetry is such a beautiful vehicle for that. And we talked about that concept of, when creativity starts to come from you in a new way that you've never even fathomed that you would do, whether it be, oh, I'm going to get a pottery wheel and start making pottery, or I'm going to write a poem, or I'm going to write a song, or whatnot. That it's so important to allow that to happen. We were talking before about awareness being a higher spiritual principle, but allowance is also a very high spiritual principle that adds to our evolution as a soul. whatever is occurring for you in your life, even if it's something where you're not particularly happy with something that you're involved in, whether it be a relationship or an obsession or an addiction, even if it's something that's not healthy, sometimes we have to allow it to run its course. We have to allow it to run its course until we get to that pinpoint place, hopefully sooner than later, where we understand why we needed to go through that experience or that relationship. And the reason for this is because there is absolute validity in every single thing, big, little, hard, easy, inflow, out of flow, every dynamic of the polarity that we can experience, there is validity in it. It is actually what we are here for. So when we stop fighting, when we stop resisting the things that are coming up for us and we allow them and then we pay attention to them, we are aware of them, and we start to go really deep with, why is this triggering me? Why is this important for me? Why is this no longer important for me? Why am I holding on to this? Why do I need to let go of this? All of these questions. Within that process is our spiritual evolution, which is what we are here for. I've said this many times, but one of the things that always stuck with me that my spiritual guide said to me one time is that Earth experience is an experiment in experience. That is why we are here. It is an experiment in experience, which means that there is no wrong experience. There is no wrong way. Now, that does not mean that we don't have boundaries, that we don't know our boundaries. Some people don't even know their boundaries, which is why they have a lot of life experience that's boop, 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 up and down, up and down, up and down. We do have to, within that concept of allowing what is showing up, surrendering to it, being present with it, and being aware of what it's trying to teach us, guide us, raise wisdom in us, therefore towards our evolution. And therefore the understanding of how to set boundaries for your life, for your relationships. Having boundaries is also about knowing who you are. So yes, they are all intertwined, and that it's a delicate play of how does that happen in your life. But that is the chore. That is the experience of your life. So the other thing my friend said is that she's been going back and reworking the poem and tweaking it, and I love that. I love that so much, because that is definitely something that all writers do. And the reason that you're doing that is because as you are reading through it, you're realizing that, okay, I'm not saying exactly what I need to express here. And so you need to find the right word, the right pause, the right rhythm, the right flow, the right amount of stanzas. There's so many concepts to, okay, what is it to write a poem versus to write poetry versus prose, versus the way you would write for a blog versus the way you would write for an autobiography versus the way you would write for a novel, etc., etc. And my suggestion would be is to not, if you're going to try to write poetry, is to not try to get too caught up in, reading, okay, this is poetry is this, and this is how it has to be written. To me, poetry is and should be the greatest freedom that we have. It's just sitting down quietly. Again, it's a meditative practice, stilling yourself and really going within to a deep self-reflective place to allow freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of ideas, freedom of imagination. A lot of times we write poetry about, things we've experienced or we've seen other people experience. But there's also this whole beautiful world of going into your third eye as a spiritual meditative practice with poetry, and going to other realms, going to other dimensions, bringing the unicorns into your poetry, bringing, perhaps flowers that talk, or beings from other dimensions, or conversations with God or Goddess. It's a complete free fall into whatever you want and need it to be. And I remember saying to a woman years ago that, sometimes in life we tend to do self-destructive things because we're trying to we think we're comforting ourselves, drinking excessively, drugs, getting involved in the same relationship with the same type of person that's abusive or narcissistic. And poetry and writing is such, even short stories, I forgot to mention that before in my little list there, is such a cathartic way to build a world for yourself, which is the world that you really need and need to live in. Building a world for yourself where you allow yourself to express in totality your rage in a way that you cannot do it in real life or feel you cannot do it. Poetry is so many things. It can be a time of solitude and quiet and self-reflection that we don't often get time for in the real world. So make time for it, set your alarm earlier in the morning, have a time of writing poetry at night, just as you would do journaling per se, before you go to bed. Poetry mirrors back to you who you are, where you've been. And so it shows you your journey along the way. And it's really important to do that and to see that. Sometimes when we're just thinking about something, what we're really doing is just milling it over and over and over in our mind like a broken record, but we're not getting anywhere. We think we are because we keep repeating the thought, the questions, all that stuff in our head, but we're really not getting anywhere. Writing is such a therapeutic way to actually, in a very clear way, it tends to, when you commit to it, it comes out in a very clear way, and you see it in a way that you've never seen it before when you actually write it down, because you would think you're using your mind, you are using your mind to write, but it's like it goes into another portal within your mind, which allows you, when you kind of do it as an auto writing, meaning you're not forcing it, just let it come out, and then, like my friend said, go back and read it again and then tweak it, and go back and read it again and then tweak it. And this way, each time you're going deeper and deeper and deeper with your understanding of where you've come from, who you are now, and where you're going. Poetry is very much connected to your sacral chakra, which is where your emotions and senses, that energy of those is stored. Your sacral chakra, which is also your center of passion and pleasure and connection to relationships. So that, along with your throat chakra, which is also your voice, your ability to express, and your ability to listen. Okay, that's the polar opposite of talking is listening. Conversing is listening. So those two chakras, and of course your heart chakra is involved. And I would dare to say every chakra is involved when you're writing poetry. Because poetry really is the excavating. My guides just threw this in. It's the excavating of yourself. It's the excavating and the displaying of yourself. They're showing me a statue, like if you would go to a museum and you would see Egyptian statues, or from any century, something that was, buried, and then it was excavated and it was, put on display. And that's what poetry is. Your poetry is your life. Poetry is life. Poetry is your opportunity to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, and not necessarily or at all by other people. It's for you to do those things for yourself, maybe once and for all. I remember my first experience with poetry. It probably happened around 14, when I was 14. And my uncle at the time brought me the Fleetwood Mac Rumors album. I did not know who they were. And he handed it to me. And if you know that album, which I'm sure everybody does or should, it's Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks on the front. And Stevie Nicks is dressed in a black flowing her Rhiannon dress, and she's holding a crystal ball, and she's got ballet slippers on. And I remember my uncle handing it to me, and he said, Cher, I think you're really going to like this girl. And I remember looking at that picture, and there was something about my first instant of that first picture. I think I've looked at every picture of Stevie Nicks since, that I could find and get my hands on. But I remember my first time seeing her and just absolutely falling down this, Alice in Wonderland magic, rabbit hole into another dimension. It completely changed. Now, in retrospect, it completely changed who I am and molded and shaped who I am as a woman. Because looking at that picture, I knew there was something in her that was also within me. I knew that she had something to offer, something to say that was going to change how I looked at the world, and that it was going to be life-changing. It was going to be forever, that there was going to be a forever connection with her. This was all before I heard her sing, heard her speak, or read any of her song lyrics. Just by looking at that picture, I felt what I'll now call a resonance, an attraction to her, an inspiration that I knew was a part of a parallel, journey with my life journey. I knew she was powerful. I knew she was poetic. I knew she was romantic. I knew she was young, but she also knew who she was. I knew she was going to fight for expressing who she was, all by looking at that picture. And then I put the album on my record player, because yes, we had record players in our rooms in high school in 1984. And my mind was blown open. My heart was blown open. And I fell in love with her. And I'm still in love with her to this day. And I won't get into my whole Stevie Nicks journey here, but I'm sure you have a Stevie Nicks in your life. It could be your mother. It could be your aunt. It could be a famous person. It's that person who opened up the creative muse within you. And that's when I started writing poetry. I would love to go back in time and be a fly on the wall in my bedroom. In my lavender colored bedroom, everything was lavender, from the carpet to the walls to the bedspread to the pillowcases. And and watch myself. I remember sitting on the floor leaning against my bed, and I actually still have the binder upstairs in my office of all the poems that I wrote in high school. And I'm sure they're all about boys and things like that, but the point is that she started that journey of me being a writer and connecting to writing as a therapeutic, cathartic tool, and as a way to express myself my whole life. And I've tried to write a lot of things. I've written a couple children's books. I actually wrote half of a novel. I've written 2 books of women's poetry that I did publish and are on Amazon. If you're interested, I can send you, I'll tell you the link at the end of this. I've written poems that were published in my local newspaper. I did have a blog. I've written a lot on a Facebook page that was for women. But it started me on a journey of really knowing and expressing myself in that way. And then, of course, it made me very interested in all kinds of poetry. And I've read lots of poetry. I love poetry, and I love different kinds of poetry. I love Mary Oliver because of her connection to nature. I've read so much of her poetry. I love Sylvia Plath because of her just raw honesty about her depression and how it affected her life. I love Edgar Allan Poe for having the courage to, express the darkness and the shadow that he felt and saw in life. And I really do think that he was traveling to other dimensions as well. My interest in poetry is diverse because I'm interested in how people see the world, not because I need to or want to see the world the way they do, but because it helps me to understand how I see and define the world, even if it is in comparison or contrast to how they do. So that's also why I love music, because to me, lyrics are poetry. They are aspects of the person. It is a biography of that person's viewpoint of life. So I love Johnny Cash. I love reading his song lyrics because to me, they're poetry. Joni Mitchell, that's poetry that was put to music. But I also love reading poetry that was written by African American women about their journey. I love reading poetry that's from a different time, Victorian times or whatnot, so that I can understand and see what life was like in that day and time, and to put myself in that place and to like walk in those shoes, to have that experience because I'm not having that experience. Experiences make us richer as people, and poetry allows us to experience people from different times and different cultures and different viewpoints and different religions. Okay, so to summarize, I'm inviting you to try something new if you're not already interested or have never been interested in poetry, and look at it as a prayer. You can even write poetry as a prayer if you would like to. I've done that in some of my women's circles. Look at poetry as a meditative practice to center yourself. Look at it as a cathartic process to unearth something that needs to be unearthed from you. Look at it as a way to see the eyes through metaphor, the metaphor of how is something in your life like nature, and there's so many aspects of nature you can use in a poem. Look at it as a way to bring more humor into your life. I mean, I think there's actually a great need for people to write more humorous poetry. There's a great need for more humor in general in life. At this stage of my life, I am absolutely, and really never have been, being a sensitive person, I'm not interested in watching anything on television or movies that has to do, or reading that has to do with crime or murder or death or politics or conspiracy or, violence in any way, shape, or form. I'm not into action movies. I'm into things that are about slowing down, connecting to spirit in some way, nature, how to understand my body and help my body flourish, how to get more connected to my soul, my emotions, listening to people talk about ideas and concepts. Anything that helps us understand how we are more connected than not connected. And I think that poetry can do that. Even if you're reading something from a time long ago when there was no media, no television, no electronics, and you're reading these very ancient old poets, like Thoreau, or Emerson, and they're talking about these deep spiritual concepts, and you start to understand that we really have not changed in that aspect. That is the core of all of us. That is what connects us, is who are we as people? What is it that we all want that is the same, which is love and kindness and understanding and sharing and serving each other. So yes, poetry connects us to each other, and it connects us to our self, our ego, which is important because we need to dive into that. But then hopefully the point is that then jumpstarts us to actually connecting more so to our higher self. It's a starting point. So it connects us to ourselves, it connects us to each other, it connects us to our communities, and it connects us to the higher spiritual principles that join us. And of course, it connects us to that which created us, Mother, Father, God. So I hope that this podcast today inspired you to allow poetry into your life. If you're not interested in writing, you might just start by reading, or you might jump right into the writing point part, or you might understand that the poetry you've been writing, you might see it hopefully on a new level. And I think I've really just scratched the surface of the varied meanings of poetry and how it can heal us and support us, how it can calm us, how it can excite us, and how it can spark our creativity. And when we allow and spark our creativity, a lot of people find creativity to be something that they only give time to when they have time for it, which is limited to no time. But the truth is that allowing any type of creative practice, whatever that is for you, whether it be planting a garden or cooking a few new recipes each week or painting or whatever it is, photography, anything that is creative is expanding you in all other ways, in various other ways across your life. Because we are creative beings. We come from the creator. We are aspects of that. We are meant to create, and not once a month or 2 times a year you go to the paint and sip class and you drink your way through it because you don't think you have a creative bone in your body, as women like to say. And I'm not making fun. If you do that, at least it's a start, it's a beginning. But the fact that you're drawn to something like that, let that again be the jumping off point that, wow, I actually like being creative. I need to make this a part of my life. I need to make time for it. I need to make energy for it. I need to make room for it, because creativity will expand your energy in other ways. It'll make you feel more physically energetic. It will make you feel more expansive and excited about life instead of stagnated and bored. It will give you something to talk to other people about so that when you go out and about, you don't have to talk about politics all the time or sports all the time or the weather or how you hate your job or your crappy relationship, the things that we get into ruts talking about, your medical problems. Not that these things aren't real, not that they're not playing a part in your life, but they aren't who you are. So creativity of any kind allows you to expand other people's minds, to expand other conversations, and to get other people excited about something new and adventurous in life. The truth of the matter is that we have to stop putting creativity on the back burner, because without creativity, we are contracting. If you think about any time you've been creative, if you put aside the judgmental piece of it, you felt very expansive. Even if you said to yourself, I don't really like what I'm writing right now. I don't really like the way this piece of art is coming out. But you're again aware. But I do like the way I'm feeling. I do like that I'm allowing myself to take this time to let this energy flow through me, even if I'm judging it, even if I'm not sure I like it right now. I am allowing the creative life force of the energy to flow through me. I am aware of what it's triggering for me, what it's bringing up as I watch what I'm creating evolve and change. And I'm giving sacred space for my creation to evolve. It doesn't have to stay written this way. It doesn't have to stay in this, I can change something, this, that, or try a different medium over it, if you're making a piece of art, or I can start from scratch if necessary, but I can also just stick with it and let it come through the process to the fruition. And then go back and look at, okay, where was I at the beginning of this creative project and where am I at the end of it? Who was I then? Who am I now? How have I changed? How have I learned? Where do I want to move forward with this? So yes, creativity is healing. It is catharsis. It is freedom of expression. It is connection to nature. It is connection to the beauty and the mystery of the world. It is connection to other people, other viewpoints. It is connection to that which created you, your spiritual side. And these are the points of life where true power and empowerment lie. So I hope I've inspired you today to use your imagination, to use your voice, and to see what kind of a journey it takes you on, to put aside your fear and your confusion and let the potency of poetry move through you. So I'm going to read you a poem that I wrote. I actually wrote this poem in two different segments, meaning I started this poem a year and a half ago and just finished it last night. And I don't want to tell you what the poem is about before I read it. So I will, so you can have the experience of whatever the poem may arise for you. But then later at the end, I will tell you a little bit about what it was about if you're interested. And if you're not, you can just skip over that segment. So I'm going to invite you to take this on as a meditative, like a guided meditation practice so that you can understand the power in that. And again, just listen. You can always go back and listen to it again. You don't have to try to figure it out as you're going along. Just allow it to arise in you, whatever it does, and pay attention to that. Be aware to whatever it arises in you, whether it be a feeling in your body, a release of an emotion, a particular phrase or words in the poem. And then later you can look at that. But just go with the flow of it as you would a guided meditation. So maybe close your eyes or light a candle and stare at the flame. Lay down, get a comfy blanket, get a hot cup of tea, whatever is going to put you in a state of a little bit of quiet and meditation for this reading. A daisy of a day. We're always running fragile. The daisies, they stand still, tiny, mighty, merry meeting us along the way. The wayward wind spinning, but not shaking them. They only do dance, the daisies. Fretting nothing, they shimmy, and you'll never take their happy away. Careless, in a world that isn't free for you and me. Beckoning us to stop, center, and drop into their sunny side up core. Eyeball them deep. Do you actually dare to think they've not endured trauma too? Torrential rains pelting the tender seasons of their life. Buggy creatures nipping upon their fragile, perfect petals. Petals grown painstakingly, a finale to the final push open. Life has gnawed at them. It has fallen heavy, asking for much support. Yet they pop up each dawn, dew-hungry, ready, opening to the light, craving a golden day start to finish. They keep their inner eye centered on being of assistance. So greet them at the garden gate. Watch the dogs pee on them. The children grab and uproot them. Lovers hand them to each other with wild eyes for 2 seconds of pleasure. The daisies are givers in a world of takers. I have trail run along, lost in the daisy's steady beauty, mesmerized by their friendship, only to come again the next day to see they have been plowed down by men on tractors to make way for their supposed way. The whole wide world is in some people's way. The daisies don't do little, we do too much. We worry as raindrops dripping, dull and incessant gray. I gave my trauma to the holy white petals of them one day. I bent everything that was crushing my heart toward their lovely little faces. I slowed my life breath before them. I let the little champs dissolve the dissolving that was destroying me. Time, it stood dead still in that second I offered myself to them. You are here. You are alive, they whispered to my heart. And my heart smiled, surrendering its fight with itself. I chose to live that day, and now as long as I live, astounded that a miniature flower took the immense pain in my harrowed heart, buffing it soft, 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 and away. And that is what they mean when they say, God is in everything. God was in the tight, chest-clenching reminder to look deeper, to let go. God was in the voiceless daisy, speaking louder than anything or anyone, to free fall into the healing void behind the invisible veil. A place where I am only whole and forever fully well, where one simple daisy holds every simple secret of the complex universe. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the poem was about, without going into too much detail because it doesn't matter. It's about what the poem was for you. So if you're not even interested in this segment, you can just skip it altogether, and just go back and listen to the poem again or do some journaling on the poem. If there was something in particular that arose for you, it may not have. If at all, I hope that it inspired you to write your own poetry, because that was my complete and utter goal of this podcast today, is to get you to read and write poetry and allow this beautiful art form into your life. So, as I said, I wrote the beginning of that poem about 1.5 years ago, and at that time, I was experiencing a lot of weird sensations in my chest, heart area, radiating down my left arm. At the time, I thought it was anxiety and panic attacks because, again, not to go into great detail, but there was a lot of things going on in my life at the time. Ending of relationships, my dog was severely ill and I didn't know if he was going to make it, and various other things. Big things that were all happening at once and were really weighing on me. And so I thought I was going through anxiety. But chest pain started to get worse and worse. And it turned out 3 months later that after going for medical advice that I had a 90% blockage in the main artery in my heart. So big stuff. Do I still believe that the things that were happening in my life and that had led up to that point were playing a big part in that blockage? Yes, I do, because I am an energy worker and healer, and I believe in energy as the basis of everything that's happening to us and around us. So, but I also have a strong family history and genetics of heart issues, cholesterol, high blood pressure, all that stuff. I wasn't really paying attention to my health. I didn't feel bad leading up to that point, but I wasn't going for my regular physicals and blood work and monitoring all that stuff, cholesterol, blood pressure. And I should have been. And I'm very honest about that, even though it makes me look like a fool. I'm honest about it because I want to help other people from my experience. So go get your medical tests, go to the doctor, do all that stuff. That is a part of helping yourself. God does work through medical personnel. It's not always about holistic things. Medicine is a part of a holistic package. You can't just rely on prayer and meditation and creativity. Those things are huge. We can't be leaving out one or the other. We need all of those things. And that is my message to people as I move forward, is to integrate and allow the totality, again, the experience of the experiment to occur for you within whatever feels right for you, of course. So when I wrote that poem, I was out on a trail run because I'm a regular trail runner, and I started most times I would run and I didn't have any chest pain. So that was another reason that I thought that this was anxiety and not something physical. But this particular day I did. I was probably about a quarter mile into my run and I started to have severe chest pain to the point that it scared me. And I stopped and there were these little tiny daisies. I mean, the smallest daisies you've ever seen, those little tiny ones. And I just bent my face over and I just looked at them. I didn't ask them a question. I didn't per se communicate with them. I allowed myself to be present in that moment because they were the only thing that was calming my nervous system and giving me a sense of peace and calming my fear. And the miracle that happened was that within 10 seconds of just connecting to those daisies, the pain went away. Unfortunately, again, that made me think that this wasn't physical, that it was more something that had to do with my anxiety, nervous system, mental health. Do you know what I'm saying? So again, you should always get something checked out. If it's happening repeatedly, you need to have medical intervention and input. But I was amazed, and I came home and wrote the first part of that poem, just scribbled it on a piece of paper, and ended up stuffing it in my kitchen cabinet, and remembered it yesterday and pulled it out and wrote the end part. So this is another interesting thing about poetry, which is it doesn't always have to be complete in one sitting. You might hone it, like I was saying about my friend, over the course of a week or a couple months, or it could even be over the course of a couple years. I remember seeing a piece of artwork that was just hauntingly beautiful, and I don't remember the artist. I remember it was a woman riding on horseback in a museum, and when I was looking at that artwork, I read the little description on the plaque on the wall, and it basically said that the artist had worked on that painting over the course of 7 years or something like that. And I was just like, wow. So, we are all works in progress. We are creative works in progress. We are evolutionary works in progress. We are expansive works in progress. There is no beginning to us and no end to us. So never feel that there's a timeline on anything because you are timeless. You are not timeless as the person you are in this lifetime. Yes, you will not exist in this body forever, but your soul is timeless, and something you perhaps don't complete in this lifetime, you will complete in some lifetime. There will always be opportunity to bring yourself to fruition. And that's a beautiful thought, a beautiful, beautiful thought. So yeah, it was very interesting to feel this. It was because of my friend reaching out to me. It inspired me. I've been really focusing on my art, and I felt inspired to write again. And so that was great. That was a moment again where I was aware that her expansion into creativity was reminding me of how much I loved writing poetry. And so I followed the breadcrumbs and ended up finishing that poem, which is very powerful and gave me closure to that whole experience. So the poem talks about this concept of offering yourself up to the possibility, the truthful possibility that there is healing for you, and that it doesn't always have to come from what we think are the big things in life. I need to go for a week-long retreat in Bali in order to heal from my divorce. Not that I'm saying that that is wrong or a bad thing. If you're somebody who's never allowed yourself to go on a vacation in your life or to do something like that, it's a beautiful thing, a majestic thing to do that for yourself. But what I'm saying to you is to understand that if you cannot afford to do something like that, whether with time or money, that the possibility of healing is available to you in the tiniest things: a conversation with a friend, connecting with a small flower, and watching the clouds float by, reading a poem that shifts your perspective on how you've always looked at a situation in your life and allows you to surrender it finally and let it go. Healing is always possible, and it doesn't have to be some big production. It's actually very quiet. It's always there, and it's ready for you. It's ready for you to reach out for it and connect with it. And that's basically what I've been saying about poetry, whether you're writing it or reading it or listening to it or any type of creativity. that healing is at the ready. It's our birthright that healing is available. It's our birthright that we are in totality whole and well and healthy. And sometimes we just have to go into another dimension. You have to allow yourself to catapult metaphysically into believing and trusting that there is another dimension where you just have to go there, grab hold of it, and bring it back with you into this dimension because it's yours. It belongs to you. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up for today. I do want to say thank you if you made it this far. It would bring me great joy to know that this helped you in some way. If you want to reach out to me, you can message me at runningonreiki@gmail.com. It's running, capital RUNNING, on Reiki@gmail.com. And I would love to have a little chat with you about your poetic life and what it's meant for you, and if this inspired or opened anything in you, because that is why I do the podcast, is to inspire others and to help you connect to your inner light. It made me really happy to make this podcast episode today. I don't think I've recorded one in almost a year. My last one was on Goddess Isis, which really got a lot of listens. It was probably my highest listened to podcast. So I've really enjoyed doing this. I think I started doing the podcast during COVID when I couldn't do my in the community goddess circles, and I just needed to get, to express my voice. And we all need to express our voice. So that again is another aspect of why I do these, which is to bring you back and to remember your light, your power, your gifts, and to express your voice, because it's needed. Every voice is needed. If you're here, you are needed. So Reiki goddess blessings to you, and I will try to be more consistent as I possibly can with my life has become busy, my human life, for multiple reasons, but I still love to tap into my spiritual life and serve others as I can, and that is what this podcast is for me. So if you are interested in my books, they are on Amazon. My name is Sherry Sharp, and my first book is called Crowned, Becoming the Woman of My Dreams. The Missing Things Were Goddess Wings. That book is entirely poetry and prose about my connection to myself as a woman, my journey as a woman, and then my discovering of the divine feminine and how she empowered that journey when I moved into my 40s. And my second book is called Soul Speak. I'm sorry, it's called Call Her In, Soul Speak from the Divine Feminine. So you can find both of those on Amazon. I also have copies if you'd prefer I mail it to you, I can do that. Again, just contact me at runningonreiki@gmail.com. And if you like a signed copy or for me to write, if you want to order it from me, I will actually do a little guided message that I hear from you from Spirit and put it in your book and sign it. So again, thank you for being here today. Thank you for being interested in this topic, and I wish you a beautiful day. Reiki blessings.